first section we're going to dive into here is an overview of the ACH network. This is going to make sure that we all are on the same page and we understand kind of the basics of ACH, how it works, and who those participants are. So speaking of participants, we lay it out in this format when we teach it to our members. And I think this is a really great way to give an overview of who is involved in an ACH transaction. We'll identify those participants on the next slide with some names that might be a little more familiar to you. So we always start along the bottom of this slide with the authorization. Authorization is what sits between the receiver and the originator and gives the originator the authorization or the ability to debit or credit that receiver. So if we think about a payroll example, I would be the receiver and UMACHA would be the originator. They are sending me my payroll credits. Similarly, for a debit, maybe the electric company is the originator and I'm the receiver, and I've authorized the electric company to debit my account for my payments. So if we move up the left-hand side, this is the originator. This is going to be you in most cases. And you have an origination agreement with the ODFI, or in our example here for our training, this is CCF Bank. They are the ODFI for the transactions. They're taking the entries that you send them and they're sending them on to the ACH operator. And from there, they make their way to your customer's financial institution to debit or credit your customer's account. So let's kind of take a look at that here on this slide to see the bottom. Again, we have that authorization sitting between your organization and then your customer or your client, your receiver. We have CCF Bank up there in the upper left-hand corner, and then the upper right-hand corner, that is your customer's financial institution. Could also be CCF Bank. They could be both the ODFI and the RDFI if your receiver also holds an account with CCF Bank. So kind of understanding there could be times where those two institutions are the same. A couple of other participants that sometimes exist in the ACH network include things like a third-party service provider. So this is going to be an organization that's not a financial institution that is offering ACH services or performing ACH functions on behalf of one of those participants that we talked about on the last couple of slides. So think about like an accounting firm that creates ACH files for their payroll customers. That could be an example of a third-party service provider. Could also include things like creating ACH files for the financial institution. We have a sending and receiving point. Could also be a third-party sender, which is a specific type of originator that we'll talk about here in just a moment. So a third-party service provider, like I said, they're providing a service on behalf of another participant. So in this example, we're showing a payroll provider on behalf of an originator. This is pretty common. So we have a payroll provider that creates that ACH file and they give it back to the originator and say, here you go, here's your file. You can send that on to the ODFI or send that on to CCF Bank in order to process your payroll, for example. So that's what we're showing you here is you may have a third-party service provider that helps you with some of your functions of ACH. Depending on what type of business you do, you might also be a third-party service provider. So just understanding what your role in the ACH network is so that you can make sure you understand any rules that may apply to you. So then this slide is just showing how we have those functions with a third-party service provider where it's going to the ODFI, where that payroll provider and the originator are both have a relationship. Maybe that originator is logging in or has a login for the payroll provider to their online banking or their cash management system, just showing another arrangement where we might see that service provider still performing those functions on behalf of that originator. The next one we want to talk about is a third-party sender. This one trips up a lot of people because it does get a little bit complex and it can be a little bit confusing. Let's walk through it starting over on the right-hand side. So ACH operator, that is where CCF Bank or the ODFI is going to send those entries to go on to the respective receiving institutions. If we back up between the ODFI and that third-party sender, they have a direct relationship, right? So this is a customer of CCF Bank. They have accounts, they have an origination agreement. They are a third-party sender for originators of their own. So that's what we're showing here, is that this is an originator that is not necessarily a customer of CCF Bank, but they are related through this third-party sender. So this is another agreement or another arrangement that does exist in the ACH network. All right, couple other things we want to be aware of as we go into this ACH overview, a couple of different dates to understand. So there is what we call the effective entry date, and then there is the settlement date. These two are very important to understand. They could be the same, a lot of times they are, but they could be different, and that has an impact. So the effective entry date is the date that you as an originator are going to say, I would like these entries to settle on this date. So let's say we're talking about a payroll file. We want to pay our employees on Friday. We're going to put Friday's date in as the effective entry date. This is what we would like to have happen. We would like these entries to settle on Friday. Settlement date is going to be inserted by the ACH operator, and it's based on the effective entry date as well as when the entry is received, or when that file is received to the ACH operator. So here we are today on Tuesday. If we want to pay our employees on Friday, we're sending a batch of just credits. We cannot send it to the operator just yet. We'll talk about that on the next slide, but they're going to look at that effective entry date if we sent it tomorrow or if we sent it on Thursday and say, yeah, we can do that. They would insert Friday's date as the settlement date. But let's say we had last Friday's date in there as our effective entry date. We send it off to the operator. They're going to look at that and be like, well, that date's already happened. So we're going to insert the next available settlement date for those entries. So that's what we say when we say these dates could be different. What's important to understand is that you as the originator are entering that effective entry date when you wish for the entries to settle. However, on the receiving side, at the RDFI or your customer's financial institution, they are going to rely on settlement date. So if the two dates are different, settlement date is when the entries are actually going to post. So in our credit example, our payroll example, your employees would get their money to their accounts on settlement date, regardless of what the effective entry date was if they were different. So important to understand the two different types of dates and then what they mean, how they affect when your receiver is going to get that entry posted to their account. All right, so I alluded to this a moment ago, timing requirements. So when we're sending a batch of only credit entries, so let's say my payroll example from a moment ago, we're going to offset that some other way, right? Maybe CCF Bank is going to debit our account and we're just going to send those credits out into the ACH network. So there's only credits in that file. We can send that 1 or 2 banking days prior to the effective entry date. So in our example, effective entry date was on Friday. These files could go to the ACH operator on Wednesday or Thursday. We couldn't send them today on Tuesday. Now for debit entries. Debit entries, the effective entry date can be no more than 1 processing day in the future. So if we had that offsetting debit in there, so we had our payroll credits and then we had the offsetting debit to balance that file, or if we had a file that was only debits, we wouldn't be able to send that for settlement on Friday or effective entry date of Friday until Thursday. So credits can go up to 2 banking days in the future, and debits can only go up to 1 banking day in the future. There's a little bit of difference here. If we have same day, there's same day entries can go credit or debit in those same day ACH windows. So we don't necessarily have to think as hard about this for same day entries, but just know if you're sending credits only, it can go up to 2 days early. Debits, it can only go up to 1 day early.